Today we're starting something very special. We're beginning a new series on one of the finest chess books ever published from one of the greatest chess players who's ever lived. It's Bobby Fischer's My 60 Memorable Games. Now Bobby Fischer, of course, the legendary American grandmaster who captured the World Chess Championship in the 1972 match of the century, and this game collection of his always makes the lists of top chess books of all time. It's considered a classic, and the reason for that is because it's Fischer talking through his own games in his own words, and this is actually quite rare. There have been dozens of books published about Fischer, with other authors analysing his play, but to have Fischer himself talking through his thought process, analysing his games and looking at the other lines which are of interest, this is actually quite rare. There's not many books that do this, and this game collection, I think, you're in for a treat. We're going to also update it with some of the latest engine analysis, so things that even Fischer himself didn't notice. I'm going to delve in there and look for improvements with the help of the computer engine. And if you want to add this book yourself to your own chess library, I'm going to put a link in the description below. And if you use that link to purchase the book, then you get to support the channel and it's at no extra cost to you. Like I say, I think no chess library is really complete without it. So on to the game. This game was played in the New Jersey State Championship of 1957. Now Fischer was only 14 years old at the time, and he was up against an established player named James Sherwin, who was about 10 years older than Fischer. So we've got the scenario of a established master adult player coming up against a fast rising teenage prodigy. So let's see how Fischer does. It's fair to say that Sherwin is no weakling, by the way. You know, he was able to come joint third and joint fourth in various US chess championships. So, you know, one of the best players in the country in his prime. And Fischer of course exceeded him eventually, but yeah, Fischer is still quite young. Let's see how the game unfolded. But before we do that, let me ask you to subscribe to the channel so that you never miss an episode, and if you have another game that you'd like me to review, then drop it in the comments down below and I'll see if I can get to it. Okay, on to the game. So Fischer with the white pieces begins with e4, best by test. He almost always played this as his first move. We have a Sicilian defense, knight f3, e6, and Fischer's going for a King's Indian style setup. Not the open Sicilian with d4, capturing and knight takes. No, we're going to get more of a closed setup with a kingside fianchetto and castling kingside. That's what Fischer's going for here. So we see some more developing moves. We'll go through these pretty quickly because we want to get to the interesting part of the game. Fischer castles and Sherwin castles too. Now, it does mention in the book that black could play d5 here. d5 is often a move that black is trying to play in the Sicilian, and there's absolutely no reason why black can't do that right now. I mean, black is ready to castle on the next move, and I think if black had played d5 here, then black has already equalized. But we get castling instead, which is also fine. Knight bd2, and now rook b8. This is the first move which we can annotate a inaccuracy to, I think, because the rook is a little bit strange here. I don't really understand this move, and Fischer himself was a bit critical of it in the book too. It leads to trouble later. I guess that the idea could be to push b5, like often this is the idea of putting the rook on b8, but if b5 was the idea, then b5 could actually have been played immediately. It didn't need to be prepared. Just speculating here, perhaps Sherwin didn't like the rook on this long light squared diagonal pointing at white's bishop, but on b8 the rook becomes even more problematic, as we'll see. Anyway, we get some more developing moves. This c3 move is designed to help white expand in the center. He wants to play d4 and then eventually e5, and if there's ever a capture, he's got a pawn there ready to take back with. So d4 is played, consistent. Queen c7. Again, Fischer's notes say that this leads to trouble. We're going to see that black's trouble is going to be mostly on these dark squares here. Having the queen and the rook on these two dark squares is going to become a bit problematic. But okay, we get e5 from Fischer, and we see that white has got a lot of space in the center now. He's got this beautiful chain of pawns, and when you get a pawn to e5, it's often a symbol that you can start thinking about forming an attack. Now, Fischer was a great attacking player. He was a very aggressive player. He hated draws, so he always played for the win, whether he was playing with white or with black. And this is the start of his expansion in the center. Now we get knight d5, and this is a big mistake actually, which was not picked up in the original text. It's only with the help of the computer that we can see what the problem with knight d5 is. I mean, clearly the knight has to do something, right? There's a need to respond to the fact that it's being attacked. But going with knight d5 first allows white the chance to play c4. And it turns out that the knight is actually quite short of squares. There's actually only one square it can really go to. And it can only go to b4. And then after that, white can initiate a capture in the center. There's a couple of ways that black can capture back here. Let's say that he does what I think is the most natural move, which is taking with the bishop. Now in this case, white can play knight e4, hitting the bishop. Let's say the bishop moves away. And then white's own bishop comes to f4, hitting these two pieces. I told you that this was going to be problematic, right? What if black back here had captured with the queen instead? Well, this is possible, but it's also quite counterintuitive because it gives white, again, an easy tempo. Knight e4, attacking the queen. The queen's got to go somewhere. Let's say it goes back, and basically white can just push black's pieces to terrible squares. a3, and the knight's forced back to a6. I mean, white can continue pushing even further in the center. Just compare the quality of the minor pieces here. You've got this knight on the side of the board. You've got this bishop has got no future at all. White's pieces, meanwhile, are beautiful. Plenty of space in the center. After this move, this other knight also has to probably go to the side here. So you've got not one knight on the rim, but you've got two knights on the rim. The evaluation here is over +3 in white's favor, just because of the quality of white's pieces. And now actually white can win material with d6. Now this is all quite hard to see and quite deep analysis, but yeah, Fischer didn't see this. It's only with the help of the computer that we can gain these extra insights into his play. I mean, I guess the bishop can go here, but then after this, there's just, black's got too many problems. Where does the queen even go? I guess it can go here, but it's just continually being harassed, and white's pieces with every move are getting better and better and better until black's position is eventually going to collapse. Okay, so back to the game though. Knight d5 was played, and Fischer played the wrong move order. Kind of the same idea, capturing on e6, but the difference with this line and with the other line is that we don't have the easy ability to play bishop f4 because the knight's still on d5. Okay, Fischer's still gaining some initiative with knight to e6, but now Fischer closes the door and prevents white from playing the c4 pawn advance. So we can't kick that knight away from the square, meaning that we can't follow up with this move. Right, so just to show the equivalent example, let's say that the bishop moved back. Well, it's white to move, but let's say that black was given this. We can't go here because this knight is still guarding that square. Okay. So we get some captures instead. White has gained the bishop pair. So yeah, white's got this dark squared bishop and black doesn't. And black's also closed down their queenside play. Like the problem with putting this pawn on c4 is that usually in the Sicilian, black is trying to play on the queenside, but by closing the queenside, the area of the board where black is strong, like look, most of black's pieces are over here on the queenside, and closing it down like this, it means that black's play is going to be very slow, and white is basically given a free hand on the kingside and in the center. So now Fischer goes with knight g5, and this move, to me, at first looks a bit superficial. I mean, you're just throwing this knight out there, and what's the threat, right? I mean, it could easily be kicked away with a move like h6, and in fact, that's what black probably should have done. I think if I was in black's shoes here, then that's the first move that would come to mind, kick the knight away. But I suppose Sherwin didn't like the idea that the knight comes here with another tempo, and then he's got to go back. So that could have factored into his thinking, that he just didn't want to give white that tempo. He could also have been thinking that he wants to reroute his pieces. Like the move that he played in the game, knight e7, doesn't look like there's too much wrong with it at first, but you'll see. I think the rationale behind this is that this knight was not doing much over on c6. Like all of this knight's forward jumps are controlled, so he's trying to get the knight to somewhere more useful and using the e7 square to do so. However, now Fischer does introduce a concrete threat, the biggest threat of all in chess, that of checkmate, right? But again, to me it strikes me as quite superficial, which shows why Fischer was the player that he was and I'm the player that I am. You know, not anywhere close to as strong, of course. I mean, it threatens checkmate, but it's a one-move threat. It can easily be parried. I mean, there seems to be so many ways that black can just stop this threat. There's the move that was played in the game, knight g6, looks very natural, right? Just block the queen and also keep the knight moving towards where you want to take it, towards the king side. You could also consider g6, that also would seem to do a decent job, although that does leave black quite weak on the dark squares. Again, white could consider a maneuver like knight e4, and then if the queen moves back, then you could even play this sacrifice, in which case, after it's taken, you again get the bishop f4 move in. And notice that the queen can't even stay defending the rook because the other bishop is guarding the light squares. So white would be up an exchange in this case. Another possible move to defend against the threat of checkmate could be f5, which was mentioned in the book, but this allows white to do a fork between two pawns with queen e2, which hits this one and this one at the same time. Notice the knight's also attacking e6, so white would have won a pawn in this line, so that's understandable why f5 wasn't played. But g6, the knight to g6 looks very normal. But now Fischer plays a quite a standard idea against a knight on g6. He goes with h4, with the idea of h5, of course, and once the knight moves, then the threat of checkmate is renewed. It's a good pattern to remember, this one. Like whenever you have a knight on g6, consider throwing the h-pawn forward to bother it, especially if that knight, as in this case, is taking up an important defensive role. Force it to move. This wing pawn attack can be quite effective. But Sherwin seems to have everything covered. Knight to f6 seems to quite neatly prevent the threat of h5, because if h5 was played now, then black could just take it. but Fischer had a surprise in store, and this is for sure the star move of the game. If you haven't seen this before, pause the video, think about what you would do if you had the white pieces. It's a tough move to find, but give it a go. Okay, so if you paused and you had a go, did you find the amazing tactical shot? Knight takes h7. Boom. Like really, an incredibly unexpected move. I mean, a hard move to see, and it requires a really strong level of not just tactical calculation, but positional understanding to play such a move. The point is that, again, white wants the f4 square. So if so there's two ways to take the knight. If black doesn't take the knight, then white has just won a pawn. So the sacrifice really has to be accepted. If it is taken with the king, then bishop f4 comes, and this knight does not have the ability to capture this bishop because there's a pin against the black king. So again, we see the problem of the queen and the rook on those two dark squares. If, as in the game, after white takes on h7, black takes back with the knight, then you get h5 again. And once again, once the knight moves, like let's say to e7, then white gets to play bishop f4. You can see how often that this move and these two pieces are the idea that white's trying to play. So through the piece sacrifice, you get the ability to play h5 as played in the game, and Sherwin here comes up with a very interesting defense, a very creative defense, and Fischer was impressed by this move too, calling it the best fighting chance. Rather than moving the knight away and trying to preserve the material, which, as we just saw, wouldn't work after bishop f4, black would not be able to preserve the material anyway. Instead, black plays knight h4. Now, the idea here is that if white takes, so regaining the piece, but now white doesn't have this bishop f4 move. So by giving the piece back in this circumstance, black has generated some complications, some counterplay, and makes Fischer think, I'm sure, because the game is all of a sudden very complex. This is not actually quite how the game progressed, though. After knight h4, Fischer played bishop f4 first with this threat, and he had to move the queen, of course. And it's noteworthy here that now white does need to take the knight and not take the rook. There's a tactical problem with taking the rook. Like if you take the rook now, what happens is that black takes this bishop with a threat on the white rook. So really, white has to take the knight, and now this check allows black to pick up the bishop. So let's say after f3, black takes the bishop, and black's got two minor pieces for one white rook, which is a material advantage, and black should be winning here. So yeah, there's some complications here, and actually white has not succeeded in winning the exchange. And more than that, we've got now this very shaky looking position around the white king. I mean, is white better here? The computer says so, but I think this was a very good shot here from Sherwin. And he keeps up the energetic play after the move rook b7, because okay, now it is a threat that the rook could be taken, but by moving the rook to here, Sherwin is asking Fischer, okay, you can win the exchange, but you're going to have to give up your important light squared bishop in order to do so. So let's say that Fischer naively took the rook. Well, after bishop takes b7, you can see that the white king is all of a sudden looking quite lonely without its defensive bishop on g2. This bishop is an absolute monster. Black is going to take on h4 next, so the queen's entering. There's a narrow path for white to stay in the game, but you can see that the engine is saying point2 in favour of white, even though white is an exchange up, and a pawn up, by the way. So like, for example, the computer's line for white to keep equality is f3, not the first move that comes to mind, especially since the bishop could just take it. And then after the queen takes on h4, white must find the move queen h2 in order to not be losing. So, I think Sherwin, even though he misplayed the opening and clearly missed the move knight takes h7, that knight sacrifice, he's found some ways to complicate, and it's very energetic play. Fischer has got to show some precision here to emerge with the win. Okay, so after rook b7, Fischer didn't take the bait, showing incredible maturity for a 14-year-old, by the way. I mean, how many much more mature, experienced players would just grab the material without thinking? But he, even at this age, understood that in this case, the rook was worth less than his own bishop. So instead he continued pushing, trying to create some problems against the black king. Black takes on h4, and it looks shaky. This bishop's attacked now. The white king doesn't have a lot of cover, so it's a very critical position. And here Fischer goes with taking the pawn, introducing a new threat. Okay, so instead of responding to the threat, like moving the bishop out of the way, which would be very natural, let's say that, for example, he kicks the queen away, and then, well, black could take this pawn, and now actually black is a pawn up, and yeah, it's unclear at all that white's got any advantage whatsoever. So you have to play energetically in such critical positions, and that's what Fischer does. Obviously, you can't allow the pawn to promote and take a rook with check, so Fischer calls Sherwin's next move suicidal, and I tend to agree. Like, if you just move the rook out of the way, then this pawn could actually act as something of a shield against white's own attack. Like, it's almost blocking white's pathway into black's king's position. And this pawn isn't going anywhere, it can always be captured later. But what Sherwin does instead, is he actually takes this pawn with the king. But now the black king is just much too exposed. So let's see how Fischer finishes the game off. Starts with rook e4, a very cool maneuver. The threat is to play bishop e5 check, picking up the queen if that is allowed. And it also, of course, defends the threat against the bishop. Right back here, the bishop was under attack, so Fischer had to do something about that. So creates a threat of his own while also adding a new piece into the attack. So Sherwin ducks out of the way of that one, and then he goes back, bringing the rook to the third rank. So this maneuver here of rook e4 and then rook back to e3, for me that's very instructive. I mean, it shows some very subtle maneuvering, like not rook e3 straight away, but taking the time to worsen the queen first and then going back. Like, backwards moves are some of the hardest ones to spot in chess, but Fischer had no problem finding this. Of course, the rook coming to either h3 or g3, spelling big trouble for black's king and queen. Desperate move here, f5. Sherwin had to do something. If not for f5, then the queen almost doesn't really have an escape path, right? Like, let's say if it was white's move again. Let's just give black a random move here. Then after rook h3, then the queen's attacked. Well, it can't go here because of the bishop. It can't go here because of the rook. And if it goes anywhere else, let's say it just goes all the way away, then we've got, this is going to be checkmate very shortly. So f5 is obviously very loosening, but it gives the queen an escape at least. Fischer plays rook h3 anyway. The queen ducks back. And the other thing about f5, of course, is that it's blocked the queen's attack on the knight. So black is very shaky here, but there hasn't been a decisive blow as yet. Material is still equal, although black's king safety is the thing that's going to decide this game. So yeah, it's time to add more pieces. It's time to add more attackers to the fire. Bishop e5 check. Now Fischer does point out that he could have actually cashed in here and won some material. There's a couple of ways to do so. I mean, now you could take this rook, and this threat is not so scary because we've got a rook helping to guard the position, and the queen's all the way, over here, so not in a threatening spot. So that would win one exchange, and then this move would win a second exchange. So now white would be 2 exchanges up in those sample lines that I showed, but Fischer wants more. He's going for the kill. So yeah, bishop e5 check. Brings the knight in to block. And now it's time to bring the queen into these very tender looking squares around the black king. Notice how that this bishop hasn't moved. It's just been stuck as a bystander for the entire game, and this rook is just weirdly placed on b7, kind of fianchettoed rook, which is a bit unusual to see. So Sherwin decides to try running, because obviously these threats are pretty much impossible to stop. So yeah, he goes king f7, heading for the hills. But Fischer's coming in anyway. Queen g5, queen e7, defending the knight. And okay, we decide to eliminate that knight because that knight was actually defending an important square. It was defending this square which the rook wants to come to. So that one's eliminated. Queen takes f6, and now rook h7 check. And what can black do really? There's not a lot of options. There's only a couple of legal moves, in fact. He goes with king e8. Now this allows Fischer to just simply win a decisive amount of material. He goes with queen takes on f6. If the queen is taken, then we can just pick up this rook, and if we just play that line out, one bishop for white, one bishop for black, one rook for white, one rook for black. But oh wait, white's also got this other rook which hasn't played at all, but is ready to join the endgame, and with an extra rook, white's going to have no problems at winning this one. Instead, what happens is that Sherwin decides to take this rook, but leaving the queen uncaptured is not going to cut it. And the final move of the game now comes. Bishop c6 check. Sherwin has had enough. Throws in the towel, and Fischer picks up an incredible win. Now, I think there were a couple of really cool moments in this game. Of course, the knight sacrifice is the move which this game is remembered for. This one, it takes a lot, right? Like I don't think I would see a move like this, to be completely honest. And even a strong player like Sherwin must have missed it. The other thing that got me was just how Fischer was mature enough not to take this rook when it was on offer, understanding that the light squared bishop was necessary as a defender, and that it wasn't time yet to grab material. Just because bishops are worth 3 points and rooks are worth 5 points, that's a beginner scale, and you need to look at every position on its own merits. And then I really liked this rook maneuver, with the rook coming up to here to make the queen move, and then once it had moved, to play the backwards rook move to bring it to the third rank to join in the attack against the exposed black king. So that's the game one. Let me know what you thought about this game. What did you learn from the game? What were your favourite moments? And what would you like to see me do next? We'd love to hear from you, so do drop a comment. Also, like the video if you liked it, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode. And one more thing, remember, if you want to get the book for yourself, there's a link in the description below so that you can grab yourself a copy and add it to your library.